Sitting back on the road, back on the road, and back on the road, back on the road. Steady as I go.
Hi folks, so thank you for stopping by. If you would like to learn how to build a camper van like this yourself, then please check out my other YouTube videos. So if you guys have found these videos helpful, you can help me out in a big way by picking up a copy of my first ever album that my brother and I recorded in Nashville late last year. Any proceeds will go to future recording projects, as well as taking the band on tour and hopefully promoting it. I'll leave a link in the description and talk a little bit more about it at the end of this video. Okay, so now we're going to do our roof rack next. I've just put the roof light into place, although it's not actually properly fixed yet. I've set up both the roof rack bars, and I've set them on each end at symmetrical points to hopefully gauge the same distance from this side, and there to there. So you can see our roof boards are loosely into place here. I've been using 20.5mm thick wood by 94mm wide. That should be plenty enough to take the weight of anything on the roof here. So this wood isn't treated. You would normally use pressure treated wood for any outdoor application like garden furniture or anything like this, for example. But it does give a green tinge to the wood, and I didn't really want that look. You could of course stain it a brown colour, but I really like the natural pine look, just like we've got in our van, so I've decided to keep that, and I'm going to use some yacht varnish to finish it all off and make it as watertight as possible. So what I've done now is I've put it into place like I said, and I've measured from one end here to the other end there. Great, so like I said, we measured from one side to the other, and we came out 72.8 centimetres. I know that each of our boards are 9.4 centimetres thick, and there's 6 of them, so we're going to times that by 6 and work that out. That gives us 56.4. So we're going to take our total length minusing the width of the boards there. That leaves us with 16.4, and we know that we're going to have 5 gaps to fill in between all those boards. So if I do 16.4 divided by 5, that gives us 3.28 centimetres. So basically we'll be going for 3.3 centimetres between each bore. So that 3.3 centimetres is the distance that we need to create between each board to make them set out nice and evenly. So that's 3.3 centimetres between these two, between these two, between these two, and so on. So using my table saw, I've just cut 2 pieces of scrap wood to 3.3 centimetres to use as spacers. You probably don't need to go quite so over the top as I have, but I like to keep everything as clean as possible. So I've clamped the first couple of pieces into place, and our first piece here has been butted up right against the end of this supporting bar of the roof rack. As you can see, my spacers are into place, one there and one there, so that just makes sure that there's a nice even distance between the 2 pieces of timber. And I've just loosely put them into place on the back. So I'm pushing this one further back because the roof light isn't in the way, but for these 4 pieces here, the roof light is in the way. I'm just going to put them loosely into place, and then later on I'm going to draw a line straight across here so I can cut them so they've got a nice even straight line going across the back. So just before I go ahead and start drilling through, I've put 2 dots on here to mark out where I'm going to be making my holes. Both of them are 2.5 centimetres in from each side, or 1 inch. So I've got a drill bit here that's designed to drill from metal, because we're going to be doing wood and metal, and it's a little bit wider than our bolts themselves. So I'm using some M5 bolts that are 50mm long, so I know that that is long enough to go through the timber and through the roof rack itself, and for me to join them together. So as always, we're going to keep our drill nice and straight, putting it on top of that point that we marked off. Oh. I think the camera's about to fall off, so I'll show you this in just a sec. Anyway, we've got a hole through our timber and we've got a hole through the roof rack. We can then go ahead and put our bolt through. Now this is a roofing bolt, so they're pretty sturdy. It's got a nice flat surface as well, which is good because it means it has plenty of area to adhere onto the timber. Okay, so I've just very loosely put that into place just to make sure it stays there as we go ahead and do the other bolts. So basically just follow the same procedure across all of your roof bars until you get to the very end, and then you can then undo them all, and we can go ahead and varnish it to make it watertight. Okay, so we can quickly just show you those in place, and now I'm going to go ahead, use a square edge across the side here and this piece of timber, and I'm going to draw a line across the back piece to mark off where I need to make those cuts so that all those pieces finish evenly at the back. As you can see, I've made this little contraption here. I've taken a scrap piece of wood and I've drilled a 12mm hole and put a 12mm dowel in it. And what I've done is I've tied a piece of twine to the end of it in the centre of our boards. And I'm also, in just a sec, going to tie a pencil on this end. And what I'm going to do, if I can show you here without falling off the ladder, is use it to basically scope a semicircle out across the front here. So we can go ahead now, we can unbolt all of this and we can cut that with a jigsaw. So, clamped our workpiece into place, and go ahead and take this off with a jigsaw. Just take your time and just slowly follow that curve. Great, so there we go. I'm going to keep these pieces to use later for our storage boxes. So keep them handy. But go across all your pieces now and do all of your curves. So there's all our pieces then, cut to shape. You can see our curve around there. What I'm going to do now is we're just going to go over all of these different pieces and just check for any splits or cracks in any of the pieces of wood. We're doing this because when we put the varnish across here, if there are any little splits, then the varnish is just going to drip into there and it's not going to seal our timber properly. So we're going to go ahead and do this now. I'm using the Ronseal natural wood filler, so it's as close to that sort of pine look as we can get. And if I see any cracks anywhere, I'm just going to fill them with this filler, just pushing it in with our finger. Leave it to dry. I'll probably come back later today and then we'll just sand this back and then we can go ahead and varnish it, okay? So we've given our wood filler enough time to dry off, so now we're going to go ahead with some sandpaper. This is some 80 grit sandpaper. We're just going to go along, smooth these all out. We go to any splintered edges like this and just take those off as well with the sander. And you can choose as well to sort of edge the corners a bit with the sander, just to take a little bit of that really hard edge off and soften it up a little. So we'll do it the 80 grit and then we'll move down to a 240 grit just to smooth it all off, and we'll go ahead and varnish it. So now we've gone ahead and sanded the whole thing, we can go ahead and remove all of the dust. This is really important because we don't want any of this getting caught up in our varnish. Okay, so now we're ready to give this its protective coat, and I'm using some yacht varnish here. I got this from Toolstation here in the UK. So it gives it quite a glossy finish. Of course you could get one that's got like a matte look and that will just give it more of a natural finish. But this will give it a bit of a shine. I'm going to use a brush to apply this. You can use a roller as well if you want to. After we're done with this, I'm going to use some white spirit to clean my brush off with. And you want to make sure you do this in a pretty well ventilated area because this stuff isn't so great to breathe in. Firstly, I need to give this a good stir. It says you can leave it for a minimum of sort of 12 hours before you give it another coat, or overnight. So what we'll do is we'll do this once a day for the next 3 days, every morning, and just leave it to dry overnight before applying the next coat. One of the most important areas to work on are going to be the end pieces. You really want to make sure that end grain is covered well, because this is where wood tends to absorb most moisture. Great, so I'm going to go ahead and do this to all my boards now. Okay, so first time using that, I can see that the timber has yellowed a little bit. With our brush, as you can see here, I've just popped it into this container here with a bit of white spirit, so that's the way you want to clean your brush off when it's got varnish on. So like I say, we'll leave this overnight now. We'll do a few more coats of this. Because our roof rack is going to be taking some punishment from the weather, I'm going to go ahead, brush it down. What I'm going to do is just seal these holes that we've created. So there's now some bare metal showing. You seal it with this red oxide just to make sure that it doesn't rust. And do the same on the underside. Right, so next up I want to take a little bit of this length off because I feel like it sticks out too much and it doesn't look that good. So I'm just going to measure 12 centimetres in on each one. Right, so I'm going to cut this using my jigsaw, and I've got a blade on here that's designed to cut through metal, so I'm just going to follow that scored mark. Next up then, just take a metal file, just file off these edges, and again go ahead and put some more of your red oxide on there. So we can go ahead and pop our caps back on now and then install this back on the roof, ready to then install the pine boards on top. So just a couple of things I'm going to mention. With our bolt and our nut, we've got a washer on the end. So that washer is going to sit underneath our roof rack. I've got this because we've got sort of ridged edges. This washer will make sure we have plenty of contact across the surface of there so that our nut doesn't unravel as the vibrations of the van kick in. Another thing we're going to use as well is some thread locker. This is the blue one, so this is a medium strength, but this will help prevent the nut unravelling as well. You can also get a red one which you'll just never get undone. But we'll put some thread locker in first, and you just want to apply some to the parts of the thread that are actually going to come into contact with the bolt. And put your bolt into place. I'm going to put the washer on underneath first. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and do that for all of these, and then you're good to go. Go and check it all out. Great, so there it is, there's our final product, and I'm pretty pleased with how this has turned out. I quite like the glossy finish that came off from the varnish. That varnish is going to really help keep it weather tight, and that thread locker is going to prevent all those nuts from unravelling, and also the red oxide that's on there to prevent any rust coming through. So you can go ahead and make this however you like it really. You can customise it to your own if you have something specific that you want to keep up there. This is a really good way to add a bit of extra storage. I'm going to add some of these on top of my roof rack here. I'm simply, as you can see on this, just drilling some pilot holes first, and then I'm just screwing these into place. So I'm going to add 3 along this side, and they're going to be my attachment points for my awning / canopy. And I'm going to put a few more around this roof rack as well, just to use for some netting later. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Please like and subscribe and check out our other content on all things camper. As I mentioned before, I've just recorded my first album. We'll need all the help I can get. So I'll leave you with an album preview for now, and a link in the description if you'd like to pick up a copy.
She does all that she can. Yes, anymore. I'm heading west till I cross that line. you, but their cold and harsh demeanor, it'll soon come back around.